that should be me there talking. That looks like it's okay. And YouTube has gone live, and so now I'm actually streaming this. Right, so then I can go to Bitbucket. Oh no, that's going to fail. Dashlane. Okay, so right now, several years ago, my students asked me to create a high score logging system for them because you know, we wanted to have some way of scoring scores and loading and saving them. So back I did the absolute cheap thing. Rather than spend time using an API, I just quickly hacked up some stuff in PHP because 5 years ago that was how you did this sort of thing. Now you'd use Node.js and you'd use a loopback, or you'd use various other APIs for automating some of this process. But what I thought I'd do is I'd talk you through some of the things we did, why we did them, and kind of the things you can do when you're saving events and logging events and logging histories. So so this is actually because I didn't have access to a full database, because this was just the database that was on the machine at the time. I whacked in some tables, and so I created some score data tables. So I have a score data table. A score data table was recording user ID, the particular score, the time you scored it. I have a column for cheating, right? Because I know that some people are going to try and cheat in my game, right? And they're going to, anytime you send data across a network, somebody's going to sniff those packets, right? Eventually. And somebody's going to try and inject data into your packets and create a new packet or create a new piece of information, or just try and work out what's going on. So I have a way of talking about cheating. I record jumps, an ID, an event ID, and I was recording the IP that people are coming in on. Right? So I recorded those activities. I also then generate a cheat table, and the cheat table has a username, an IP, a time, and a game ID. And this was whenever, and if I go to the end of it, whenever someone fails my cheat test, then I add them to this cheat table. Right? Now this was all for game ID 4 because that was the only one I have a cheat test on. Right? So the idea here is I've got a database table with some data in it, and I have a cheat table where I record some information about people I suspect of cheating. Right? Because cheating in the high score list is quite common. Have any of you tried to inject a score that's more than you actually scored in a game? Excellent. That's what we like to see. Yeah. So this is it's not uncommon to try and do that. There is usually, anytime you set up a high score list, someone will play with it. When I do my questioning ranking system, people will go in there and create posts to try and extract to inject higher scores for their questions. Right. So they'll try and produce a false result. So what we have, and I can show you the very bare bones of what this does, which is I have a GTL site. So on my GTL site I have a log score .php and question mark score equals 100 and user equals Simon. Oh. And game ID equals 5. Okay, so you can't really see it there. I'll have to make that bigger. I can make that bigger. So in here, in the get request, I've typed in score equals 100, user equals Simon, and game ID equals 5. And it's given me back a position, an ID for my score and a score number, right? So it's, and if we have a look in the database, do I have a game 5? There's game data 5, and I can look for the last one, and then hopefully, nope, I haven't been added. Probably because I failed to get one of the things correct in here. So game I'll actually go to, I have it there, so log score, game ID 5, user score. Paste. Right. So that should have logged to game score 5. I'm correct. Okay. So I'm maybe I need to change my game log scoring to 4. Position 15. Okay, so 5 isn't working, 4 is working. So this is giving me position 15 an updated ID, right? So there must be something wrong and broken in my game 5 update. But game 4 update gave me this. Now if I have a look in my PHP and I go to game 4, what you'll know, and then at the end here, if I go to the end of my users, there it is, Simon, and my score and my time, and my IP address, and it's called me a cheater. Right, so the cheat table has said 1. That's because I didn't log all of the information I should have logged when I put that score in. Now, when I ask for score, so I can, instead of log score, I can do display score. And it will give me the top score and all the scores down, right? So I need to actually make that more scores. So if I do game ID 4 and I do ampersand num equals position 5, and oh yes, display score PHP num equals 5. Oh, num, sorry, from, not num, from equals 5. Yeah, so it will see this was the last score here. The Simon 2035 was the score I just inserted. Right now, I'm getting this as a list of the position, the list, a name and a score. Position list, name score, position list, name score. I'm position 15 with that name and score, but I'm a cheater, and so I only get it if my IP address appears in the cheating table. I get all scores. If my IP address doesn't appear in the cheating table, I only get the scores that don't have the word cheat next to them. Right? So I've created a kind of honeypot for people who cheat in my games, because as far as they're aware, they've been able to get their score up to the top, but as far as everyone else playing the game is aware, they haven't. Right? So, and so what we can do is we can look at how that system works. Now, what we can do for you guys is you pick, we give you a different game ID, and unfortunately you can't really see that, but if I give you a different game ID, then I can code up the PHP to accept an ID from you and a hash from you, right? Now the hash is how we check cheating in the system. So if we have a look, so that's all fairly standard. You've hopefully seen database stuff before. You're all happy with that? You're all happy with editing PHP MyAdmin? You've all seen that before? Okay. So if we have a look at the code and we go to the bit bucket, and you go, oh, it's like we did 32 minutes ago. So we can go and have a look at the PHP code that does this. We go into source and then into high scores. So you guys can all see this, hopefully. Okay, so I have a high score event logging and a server here. The high score event logging is code written by one of the students in Xcode to connect to the high score list, and has examples of how to build a query and get the list of scores and to log a score using this system, right? So if we have a look at the okay, yeah, I think I recommend it. Send. Done. Go away. Thanks. Right. So this again is relatively simple code. You guys can easily get this to work. So this is a high scores for a game, which is high scores for a particular game ID. If we make this bigger and I make that go away, right, so down here the whole high scores list, it does IP, TCP socket, it uses a host string, PGL, and an IO string and a get request. In this case is display score ID equals game ID. No? So we actually create a TCP string and then use SDLNet to resolve host. So we say, okay, where is the host? And we do a TCP open. Can I open the socket to the host? And it says okay. I then create an HTTP1 request. I add this header because this is not using a socket-based protocol. I'm using HTTP, right? So this is a web protocol, right? So I'm saving and loading via the port 80. So it's the web host that I'm building. So I build that. I then build my request stream. I send my request stream. Oh, I send it here, having built it up, and I then receive the response and display the response, right? So if you have a look here where it builds the this address stream, display score game ID from and number, this from and number, what that says is if you have 5,000 scores, you don't want to necessarily start from the first one and have to scroll through 5,000 scores. And so in my PHP code I have something that recognizes the SQL quest. It basically takes the number from and says, well, grab that position, and does a limit on the number of results it gives you. Right? So if you want to page your high scores, 10 at a time, then you go from 1, so you start with 0, 1, and have 10, and then you go 10 and have 10, and 20 and have 10, so you just make those requests per score list you wanted to see. So this is standard C++ socket opening using SDL. Now for working with Unity, they've actually just added a bunch they've improved the URL accessing in Unity. What is the most obvious mistake I've made, or the most obvious thing I've done wrong so those are logging the scores. In this one, they then put the scores into a result string and parse those results. When you want to so your score, string vector score. So this is how it pushes a score, and it gets the save high score. It creates the address stream, goes log score, user equals username, score equals score, game ID equals game ID, and hash equals hash, and resolves those by doing a resolve host and then sending it. What is wrong with doing that? I'm not checking the strings before I do it, but this is in my C++ code, so I'm hoping my C++ developers aren't trying to break my game, my high score list, because if your developers are trying to break your game, then your server's broken. Your whole system is broken. What I'm doing here is I'm actually breaking HTTP protocol rules. So when I logged this score here, and I did a log score, what's wrong with doing that? And why is that wrong? No, why is it wrong? Because anyone can see it. If you put it in a post, anyone can see it anyway, right? Just by snooping your packets, right? They don't actually, just because it's not in the address bar doesn't mean they can't see it. What's wrong? What is that HTML called? You guys have done some web courses. Well, you did some. You talked about it in the database. Can you remember what are the things you can do in HTTP? Hello Internationals, have you guys done any web day stuff? Can you remember why that's wrong? So, well, you can make errors, but that's still not why it's wrong. That just makes it fragile. If we have a look at my PHP code, if we actually go into the, I'll go into Bitbucket and we'll go back up, and if we go to high score and server, so I have improved this for the queue rate system, and my hashing still didn't work. Okay. So if we go to now I start log score, and so here look at log score, you can see how I connect to my database. This is hopefully pretty standard stuff. Is I do a include connect.php, include process score.php, parse the URL, and then include display score, right? So I actually just include a bunch of PHP stuff. Connect usually has your passwords to your database in it, which is why if you have a look here, I haven't actually included my raw connect file, because that would give you guys on all of the actual passwords to the database, right? So which would allow you to do like log in and change my database. So what I've done is I've given you the anonymized version where it just has, you know, DB user, DB password, DB name. So if you're going to do a MySQL I connect you guys can fill that in yourself with whatever your local database name and thing is. Right, so that's okay so far. What I had is I had process score. Now what does process score do? If we have a look at process score, I do a few interesting things, like I try and do get user rank, because I want to know where the score I just put in was. So I need to do a sort and a ranking. And I do a parse URL, and in there I just get the URL string, and you can see I am doing some sanitization. So I do database real escape string, so I get rid of, so you can't do SQL, straight SQL injection into here, because at least it gets rid of all the special characters. So I do this parse string, I pass parameters into data, and data creates an array with these key value lookups, right? So that's standard thing you can do in PHP. So what have I done wrong? Nope, what I've done wrong is I've used a get to set data. Okay, so HTTP has only four request types. You have get, post, put, and delete. Right, this is the protocol. The HTTP protocol has those four. Get is supposed to be what's called nullipotent. Have any of you heard the word nullipotent before? No. Excellent. I get to teach you some stuff. Okay, so second year course, you know. Yeah, we're doing this, but next year you don't have to. Okay, so get is nullipotent. What nullipotent means is that nothing, like that. If I process something, it equals the same thing as it was before. Right? So nothing, X does not change. Right? When I process X, X remains the same. I get a side effect of getting some information out, but I don't change anything about X. And that's what a get should do. Right? And so you should never change the server when someone does a get. Unfortunately, because we're bad programmers and we don't listen to our own rules, a lot of people do change the server from a get request. From having that information in the top line, they will insert something, they will change something. Cookies were a version of this, so that was a problem. But this is what's called nullipotent, so you don't do anything to the original, right? So I might be able to get, you know, it might give me an output. So I get an output, but X doesn't change, right? So in this case, f of X is output, and f of X a second time is the same output, right? So f of X. So actually, I think technically f of X equals f of X. But f of X at t, so f of X at t plus 1 equals f of X at t. So the application of X of f doesn't change X. If that makes sense. You guys kind of understand what I mean? Yeah. There is, so what I'm doing is I'm taking something that should be a get, as in just give me information, and I'm changing the database based on that, and that's wrong, right? That's naughty, you shouldn't do it. But people do a lot. So it happens. What you should do is use post. If you are posting something, then you're adding something to the web page, right, to the web interface. And then, to do that, you actually have a body on your request, right? So instead of just having the URL request, you actually build a body that has data in it. And that's how you should do this sort of thing, right? So I'm doing it wrong because I am just parsing that URL string. It requires a little bit more work to create a post, but not much more, right? And if you have a look if we look back into this up, and I go into the high score event logging, and go into source. When I actually look at how I do the high score list, one of the things you see here is so for display score is properly a get, right? So here where it says get, this is actually a get when I'm displaying score. But what I should be doing down here is when I save high score, it should be not creating a get, it should create a post. That should be post. Right? So, okay. But this should be post. Problem is my system doesn't process post for this PHP, so that won't work. Right? Because my back end hasn't been written properly. Okay, so if you ever do this, don't do it the way I've done it here, fix it, right? I have fixed it in my QRate system, so I fixed it in the more recent PHP I wrote. I fixed that because I went, ooh, that's bad, I shouldn't do that, I should be better. So code that isn't 5 years old, I have improved this, but this is the original code, so I thought I'd show you my mistakes and then try and get you guys to learn from it. Because it's the naive thing you do, right? It's the first thing you do. It's because what you are saying is that this will not change the database, right? This will not change the website, right? So the protocol itself is set up to say this won't change the database, which for most of the cases that doesn't matter, right? But if you have a system which is optimizing or is caching things, because it knows that gets don't change the database or don't change the system, it could in theory cache a bunch of them, do them in different orders, and expect things to remain the same, right? Because if all of you did a display scores, that shouldn't change anything about the scores. So I could, if I got like 5 of those requests, I could just reorganize them, run it once, and give all 5 of you the same result, because a get doesn't change the system. However, if each of those gets actually adds a score to the database, then I can't just do it once, pick the first one and apply that, and then say, well, it's get, so it's not going to change anything, and just give everybody back the same thing, because each of you will change it.
So why is it
Well, the problem is how I implement my PHP is up to me, right? I get to write code about how the server generates a page, and so if I do bad things on my server and go, oh, I'm going to do this get thing, in fact I'm going to be dirty and make that change the database, there's nothing the protocol can do to stop me doing that, right? So the protocol has its rules about how you should use it, and then if your program is bad and break it, then there's nothing we can do. So yeah, you could have rules against doing it in your company, but
in the end, it's just an RC specification, right?
Yeah.
By the Internet Engineering Task Force, like a textual document that says, well, you have those primitives, those methods, 4 or 5 methods, and then this is the expected input, this is the expected output. That's all you get. And then you need to code against it or not.
So just because it's a protocol, or just because someone said you should do it that way, doesn't mean you have to follow the protocol. Okay? But it can mean that you get screwed up if someone is following the protocol and makes assumptions, right? So another one is with, so there's something that's called unipotent and delete, right? So, because you guys had the networking course, yeah? Okay, so for the sad story, delete. Delete is what's called unipotent, right? Can any of you work out what unipotent might be? It does it once, yes, and you can apply it multiple times and it does the same thing. So delete, right, is a good example of a unipotent one. So you're both right, well done. And because, so the delete, so if I do delete ID equals 57 from X, I'll get a new X, right? So X dash. And then if I did a delete of ID equals 57 from X dash, I should get the same X dash. Because delete 57 has already been deleted. If I'm deleting a unique ID, that would be the same. Right? So it means that I can repeatedly apply this delete and get rid of that thing. Why might that be useful from a network point of view? So it allows you to basically go, oh, you were in the middle of that? Okay, well, you know, I can just apply this delete as many times as I like. It's not going to keep changing the database. So if you happen to not successfully get this packet, I don't need to confirm the delete that it only happened once. Because if you say, oh, I lost a packet, I'll just re-delete it, and that's okay, because it's a delete. So if you had already processed it, it didn't matter anyway, so you can just process it again, and it's fine. Right? So if you were thinking, you know, set position to a certain amount, right? If I set my position to position 50, right, and nothing else happens, I can just set it to 50, and that's okay. If I did +10, each time I get that packet, it would be doing an update, and therefore I would have, every time I get it, I'd move my player further, right? So that wouldn't be unipotent, is a relative addition to X position, right? So these concepts of what you should do is, so you should have get, post, put is for updating. So it says take something and take a row and update that thing. Right, so this is something that already exists in the database and update some values about it, and delete.
Patch as well, right?
In HTTP? Is there patch now?
There's a patch now as well.
Okay.
The patch is differentiation between patch and put is that in put you update the entire entity, and in patch only one entry of that entity. Like you have one property, for example, for efficiency reasons.
Right, so put updates the whole row, and patch updates part of it. Yeah. What was interesting is so a few years ago I had one of my graduate students. She went out and was working with as a game company in the Netherlands. She was Dutch, and they outsourced their database to India. Right, so they did we want a game server for our database for this game. You guys do it, right? And came back, code worked, and it was working okay. And then they started testing it with some beta testers, and as they got more and more users, it slowed down more and more and more until it was taking 10 seconds to do a score request. Right? And then you can't really play the game when you press OK and it sits there waiting for 10 seconds, processing, doing something in the database before it gives you a response to whether you're right or wrong or what score you have. And so she asked me, Simon, what's going on here? I can't find the problem, right? And so I said, well, show me the request you've got in your code, your SQL request. So she sent the SQL request, and I had a look at it. And the problem was when they were doing the SQL update to update the player's answers, they were basically doing a put style, right? So it wasn't actually a put; it was a database SQL query, but it's an SQL update that included the ID in the things that were being set. So it used the ID to find the particular user, right? So user ID was in the select user ID equals blah from tables where user ID where user ID equals this, right? So it did a select, and then it did a update on that selection, which included user ID. The problem is if you update an indexed column, the database goes, oh, you've updated my index. I have to re-index this whole table now. So because it changed the user ID, the database didn't check, oh, you're changing it to the same thing, therefore I don't need to reindex. Because you're changing the ID, it reindexed the whole database, the whole table. Each time a user scored, it had to do a reindex. And so all you had to do was take out the setting of ID from the SQL, and suddenly that went away. And suddenly it was down to like 0.1 of a second. Because all I had to do was change a value and the round trip time. So there are reasons why knowing this stuff does help. And if you get it wrong, like I'm doing here, it mostly works. In fact, I've not had it break, but it could break. And if someone made assumptions about what I was doing based on the protocol I was using, they would be wrong. And that's bad code, right? So I'm apologizing profusely before we go any further for my terrible, terrible code. But what we do in here, I also have, so logging score, I give you this information just so you can see which position your score was in. Part of the reason I give you, and you recognize this? What is this? This is a, what does that look like? It's a JSON object. Yep. So, well then, this is just a JSON object. That makes it easier, hopefully, for you guys to parse, because you can just grab a JSON parser and get the values out. And the idea is, yep, a JSON object. Okay, so, sorry, JSON. Okay, so it is the JavaScript object notation. Yeah, so it's JavaScript object. Yeah, I've not had to think about that for a long time, but it's the JavaScript object notation. And what it is it's for JavaScript. It is basically the native way in which it implements objects, which means when you're using JavaScript, if you have something like this, you can just say like score equals that thing, and JavaScript will, oh, it's an object, and it's got this named thing with this value, and this named thing with this value, and this named thing with that value. All right, so it automatically puts it in. You don't have to parse it. It's just native format, right? So yeah, it makes it easier to handle if you're doing stuff in JavaScript. And there are lots of parsers now for JSON, JavaScript object notation into other systems. So C++, you can get a JavaScript processor. Go interprets it perfectly well. So yeah, so it's kind of built in, right? And I actually also have, so the log score, the display score, when I first did it, is kind of bad because it displays space separated number, name, number, number, name, number, number, name, number, right? You have to know that that's what you're getting back to parse the string, right? To tokenize the string. You could just tokenize it on the spaces, but then you have to kind of know it's in 3 block groups, and there's nothing, like, you have to manually parse that, so you write a parser for it. So one of the things I did, and I'll just check that I actually got this correct, in my, oh, where did my big bucket go? Did I close my bit bucket? Oh. So if you have a look in the high score and you go into server, you see I also have, so get high score JSON, right? Because I decided that, you know, it would be nice if I was able to also do, and I think I can do, if I go get high score, and then this is where you have to check your protocol and say, what did I actually call these things? Get high score and get high score JSON. Have I done that correctly? Get high score, let's try. Oh, JSON, not JSON, PHP. Huh. Get high score JSON not found. Yeah, capital J. Should be there. Why am I not? So, no. Get high score not found on the server. That's a bit odd. Let's go and have a look at the server and see what's on there. But, so, I'm sure I had put it on the server. Do I have my quick connect? That way I don't have to reveal my passwords to you. Still shouldn't have to reveal my passwords even if I was typing them in. But though you could probably work it out from... So, because this is being audio recorded, the tapping on my keyboard, some people can work out what keys you're pressing based on the sound from the keyboard you're typing on. And so just by listening to you type your password in, they can work out what your password was, which is a terrible side channel attack, which you should hopefully never happens to you. Okay, so apparently it's also not going to let me log in on this machine. Connecting to... Right, okay, well, even though that's not there, I can show you the code for it. And what it does is get high score JSON. I do a simple parse the query, and I do a request, and I create it into a return, and then oh, that's actually the standard get high. Why is my get high score JSON not showing me the right thing? Interesting. That's the bad version. That's not the non-JSON version. That's just the tabular version, right? I actually have a proper JSON version somewhere, obviously not there. So I do have a high score JSON. I'm not sure why I'm not getting it out. It used to be there. So I'll have to work that out, why I've got the wrong version there. But simply what the JSON, the path to JSON is, you create an object and you tell PHP to convert to JSON. There's I think is it called convert? No, there's a to JSON. I think object to JSON, string to JSON, or object to JSON, right? So there is a to JSON format. So if we have a look at some of the actual get high score code, right? So if we now go into the actual high score and we say, right, we're going to process a high score. The interesting code is so parsing URLs. This is all fairly standard stuff. I'm doing an if set these numbers to the base escape real data. So there's some standard PHP you do to try and get rid of SQL injection, and I remove HTML special characters as well. So I first remove all of your crazy SQL injections. So here for game ID 4. New hash. This was jumps plus 1 times score times, and I'll scan out, times game ID mod 913. So what does that say about my hash? What will it look like? It'll be a number between 0 and 913. It relies on me receiving the number of jumps that you did in the game. If jumps is something that's being recorded, if you have jumps in your game. I square the score and I multiply it by the game ID and by the number of jumps, plus 1, just to make it different to the number of jumps. Just to try and make the hash a little bit harder to work out. Right? And I do a mod 913 just because it's a number and it felt like an interesting prime number to make a hash on. So, to save your score without being recognized as a cheater, what you have to do is you have to, when you post your score, you also add a hash, and you have to calculate the hash as jump plus 1 times score times, in this case 4, game ID, modded 913. Now I have to keep that information a secret on my server, because otherwise anybody could recreate a packet that had the right hash. The problem is my game also has to have this line of code in it somewhere to hash its high score to prove that it was me who was sending the high score. Right? Which means if someone decompiles your executable and they try and decompile this and try and find the hash function that you're using to generate your check, then they might be able to find a particular way of you doing this calculation and therefore be able to spoof a packet coming from you. What would be the standard way of avoiding that on the web? What's the standard kind of internet way of avoiding this kind of problem? Ignoring it, that's one way of it. So how do we deal with that with web pages? Well, this is what's being done on the server, right? So this is the server code. So your client code has to duplicate this to send me a hash with the score. But then any client could just ask the server. Yes, but how do I know that they're right? So what do you do with standard web pages? What do standard web pages do to try and stop people spoofing stuff? Or in like getting in the middle and injecting things? Come on, you guys know this. You've used the web a long time. So on HTTP protocol, what do you do to make it more secure? You add an S. Woohoo! HTTPS. Right. What does the S do?
Add security.
What does it do to add security? Right. It encrypts the stream. Right. How does it do that? Public-private keys. And what does that, and so what happens is you encrypt your content on your machine, you send it across the network, and it gets decrypted on the other side. What is the problem with doing that? Performance. As gamers, we hate things that take a long time to do. And encrypting things and running public key encryption over your entire thing to encrypt it and then send it as an encrypted version of the thing is time consuming. And also data consuming, because you have to, so basically if you have a very small packet, when you encrypt it, you still get the full size packet, right? Because it has to do a full hash, and otherwise you'd be able to use something about the length of things to try and work out what they are. So what it does is it sends big full size packets of fully encrypted material, right? Because it has to run the shaft hash over it. So the problem we get is performance. This hash function, therefore, has to be fast. That's 4 multiplications, that's pretty quick, compared to doing a full public key, private key encryption. But kind of to some extent, the public key, so in your email, some of you who have seen people have a signature with a key in it, a hash in it, to guarantee that the plain text that they've sent is actually what they intended to send. Have you ever seen that?
Those are, I think, one of the first pages I can notice. Those aren't verified for anyone on NTNU.
They're not?
I don't think they're verified for anyone on NTNU.
No.
We said that. Yeah.
Almost certainly not. But yeah, so if you're sending things in plain text, you can have a hash that you kind of encrypt. You process it and you send a hash, an encrypted hash with it, and say, this is what I tried to send, right? And then you can go through into a private key decryption of that to say, yes, this is verified that is actually sent by me, right? No, most of us haven't set up our private keys to allow you to actually check that anything we send is true, right? So no, we haven't used Outlook's feature for that. This is my very cheap, dirty way of doing that, right? Is to leave all the text in plain text so I don't see that you see the score, I just want to check that it's a valid score, that it's come from my program, and to do that, I add a wee hash. This could be instead of doing this hash, I could hash a whole bunch more information, right? The problem is, if I just do a straight hash of whatever information I'm getting, if you're trying to fake score, you fake the score and then just run a hash on that string and you get a proper hash, and so it says, yes, it definitely came from Marius. But, you know, it's a cheat coming from Marius, but it definitely came from him, right? So I have to have this come from my program, right? So that's why you kind of have to find interesting ways of kind of finding these hashes, right? And not tell people about them. No. So if you get a fake hash, so what I do is I have the, if it is the case that my hash is not my hash, right? Then here I set cheat to 1 and I insert into the cheat table your information. So what I do is, instead of just blocking you, because usually like the standard process is, if you've got a failed hash, you don't put the score in, right? And that way people who try and fake a score don't get their score added to the high score list, right? That's generally what you do. The problem with doing that is that they know that they failed to guess the right hash, and so they try again, and they try again, and they try again, and they try again, until they work out what your hash was, and then they get to put a score into your high score list. And they've broken your hash, so they can tell other people about it, put it on a website, those sort of things. Right? And at that point, you've got no protection anymore. People can spoof packets coming from your system because they've worked out how to do that. Okay? So what we were doing, and what I did in this code, is I added that cheat table and said, okay, you want to cheat? That's great. You cheat. We're happy with that. I'll add your IP address. Now, I could do things like add cookies to your machine and then check to see if I've saved a cookie and not call it cheating cookie, because if someone sees oh, wait a minute, they put a cookie on, oh, it says I'm a cheater. I think I'll just delete that cookie. So you could do things like that, but it's, yeah, that requires a bit more harassing, right? But you certainly could I could respond with a code when I got this cheat. When I gave the person back the score, I could send back an additional, you know, achievement unlocked code back in, which says, oh yeah, neat, I've got an achievement as well. It happens that when my program receives that, right, receives the high score list, and it has this achievement unlocked, the code itself saves to the save file and saves to the config for your game that you're a cheater, right? And so it then goes, aha, this person is cheating in the game, therefore whenever I send a new score, I'm going to have a wee hash next to it saying, this is probably a cheating score, right? And so your game, here I'm just using IP address to make it simple to show you how it works, but it could be more complex. You could add more data to kind of narrow down who's cheating. But because I give you score back, and when you ask for score, I check. So in the so that's that's in process score. So if I go into display score, I connect, I then parse, and I do a from and to, and so here they are a cheater. So I do a select from cheat table where IP equals IP, right? So that's where I do my check to say, does your IP address list in my table of people who might be cheating? If it does, I go, okay, well, you may well, and the game ID's right? Because in this case, I'm only checking per game. So if you cheated in game 4, I only say, here are the 4 cheat scores in game 4. If you want to cheat in game 5, you know, I'll consider that a different problem, right? I won't say, you're a cheater for life on every game. If I get results, then I select, if they're a cheater, I select all results. If they're not a cheater, I select results where cheat equals 0. Right, so that's my simple way of differentiating. Cheaters get all scores, non-cheaters only get the scores from other non-cheaters. So in this high score situation, I create kind of two populations.
When you kind of notice the difference for if you're cheating, like you can see the high score board before and after you've cheated, and then
Yep.
suddenly it just all blows with really, really high scores.
Yes.
So, like, with the honeypot thing, wouldn't it work better to just display your cheated high scores?
So there are a couple of ways of dealing with that, right? What would be, so yes, that might be something who had seen it, been playing, think, oh, I'll start cheating. They start cheating, suddenly they see more high scores that are much inflated. So what would be one way of doing a select that would avoid that?
Match up the IP address with the
I could just show your cheated scores, yes. So I could match up the IP address. There would be another way I could also do it. I could do it by date. I could do an after. So once you start cheating, I'll only show scores after the date at which you cheated. So if other people start putting in cheat scores, you can then see other people putting in cheat scores. Right? Or you're right, I could just show your IP and just show your cheat scores.
What if you only have two people, for example,
No, they get all the scores, including the cheating scores. Right? So they get to see themselves as if they're the top of everybody, even though nobody else gets to see that, right? Because, you know, those are the cheaters, and they get to go off and have their wee competition of playing, let's see who can get the higher score while cheating against other cheaters, right? So your one would say, oh, there are no other cheaters, and the potential, yeah, so if you've got a community that's talking to each other, then yes, any of these honeypot situations could create problems, right? But the situation is that if you can get rid of some of them who get to see, oh yeah, I've done it, and they'll move on and say, oh, it's no protection there, therefore I don't need to do anything. What this requires, then they have two accounts, one that's not been cheating, one that has been cheating, and then they have to sit there kind of trying to work out how to get their score to appear on the other person's machine, right? You know, it increases the challenge of doing this, right? And you could probably look at unusual behaviors, right? So this is just a simple, if you got the hash wrong, I'm going to say you're a cheater. There are other ways of doing this which would be even more interesting, which is I was recording jumps here. Part of the reason we record jump was so I could do a hash at the end, right? Because if I just seen score, then it would be somewhat easier to work out if that's the only information being sent, then that's the only information I have in the back end to do any processing on. So if I seen jumps and score, there are two pieces of information that, I could use user ID and username, so I could use more of the information. But jumps and score also give me an ability to work out anomalies. Right. So in this game, so this was you had to jump over barriers as you. So it was a game was game 4, and it was jumping over barriers while being chased by a whale. Right, just because you're being chased by a massive whale. And so as you jump over those barriers, the length of time you go through the game, the more jumps you have, and the higher your score. So in the game world, there's a relationship to how many times you jump and how high your score is. So if somebody only had 100 jumps, then they couldn't have scored 5,000 points. The maximum they could have scored would be 3,000 points because of just, you know, they would have had to jump over more things to get to that higher score. Now what that allows me to do, if someone does cheat, I can have a secondary check on is this an anomaly? If it's an anomaly, I can say, oh, wait a minute, that looks like someone's hacked my hash and put in an anomaly score. And I can flag it saying, I'm not sure about that score, or I'm not sure about that user and that IP address, or that particular game instance ID, right? So you can build up these kind of checking the quality of the score being generated. Okay. So this is all really, really old PHP now. I don't even know if it will, I'm assuming it will still run on the server. It should still be able to run on the server. It's just really bad, right? It's bad old code don't do it like this. I'm mainly showing you because this is what I did 5 years ago, and you guys get to see how it works and make a better job of it if you were going to do it. Right? If some of you want to use this and just test it to see and have it as a default backend before you fix your own database server and do your own thing, then we can set that up for you. I can insert your game ID, I can give you your own table, and it will save to that table. And if you want to have a hash, we can add a hash. If you want to have a cheat table, we can have a cheat table. Well, I can add you to the cheat table and stuff, right? So you guys can all do that. In Unity, the URL requests are a lot easier to do than all of the socket stuff in SDL. There is a relatively straightforward Unity URL request, and you can say whether it's going to be a post or a get. And then you can build the packet up of what you post. But at the moment, I'm just using get, and here, if we do it properly, it would be using a post. Questions?
So you have to create a manually table.
So, because I haven't automated this, right? What I should do is I should say, oh, if I don't identify this game ID, create a new table for that game, right? Because I could just put it all in one big table, right? And just have game IDs as a column. But then everybody would be hitting the same table, and the table would get enormous, right? So what I do is, so in here, so I was creating new tables each time, right? So you can see I had like a few tables. I could take game 16 table, which it logged me out. So game 16 table has a few scores in it. I could take that and I could duplicate the structure. So if I have a look at the structure, and actually I do SQL, export. Right, so one of the ways I can do is I can basically get the options go. Come on, show me the. I'm not used to operating on the world that this is quite. It's quite this zoomed in. Oh, it gave me the download. That's where it went. So show in folder. Open Notepad. Okay. So basically, I can take the SQL. I can create a new table for you, right? And and I can either create a new score data table, and we would add what options you wanted to add, right? Because no, because so whatever you've put in, right? So if you have a look in the code, yes, we could change the PHP, but I can also I can do a scan along all of the things that come in and just insert, like if you call pigs equals 5, I could do there's a pigs thing, insert pigs equals 5, right? There's some danger in that because I'm not sort of cleaning up stuff, and so you can start trying to play with the system. But we could set it up to be that if you want. But if you want custom stuff like that, it's relatively easy to write the code and just insert it, right? So and at the moment, I've not done this in a pretty way. But if you're doing this in a pretty way, you would have a module that was your game module, and I would. When I did parsing, I would say, oh, game ID 5, go and use the parsing config for game ID 5. And you'd just write a config file that says what things are going to be there and what things you're interested in. Right? So the config would have which hash you're going to use and those sort of things. Right? So if I was writing this commercially and actually providing you a tool that was a high quality tool, then I would have set up all those config things. At the moment, the number of times I do this is low, and so I don't automate that, right? And also, if I automated everything and made it perfect, it would be less incentive for you guys to make your own. All right, so to some extent, you guys can do this, right? This is stuff that should be well within your capability of programming. you have access to a web server, and it has a database, and you can run PHP, and you can write your own web pages. So yes, you had access, and I think you have to request access to it. You have to request a database. No, you just get one.
Yeah, you just set it up. You have an allocated amount of data.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a student, you get a database that you can do self-requested database. And you have a web space under your name, and I think it's in the W in your W drive.
And you choose to name the drive yourself.
Yeah, but you map a drive to your student web drive thing that you're given.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Windows you can map a network drive, and your network drive has your, I think, www space or the web space that you can put your code into.
If you Google NTNU web page, you get like a list of different services. So depends, but I know that the database is kind of easy to set up on Ubuntu Linux. I don't know. The web page? The database.
Student database.
I think you just should search NTNU
Might-
web page. Yeah, that might be too.
I think there's a list.
Yeah, the top one should have a list.
Create your own website.
So I think if you go to the bottom, there's a list of services.
Q drive on the campus computers. So setting permissions in Unix, front page. So under, yeah, so folk at NTNU, so if I make this bigger, so this folk at NTNU address is the default and your username is your web address, which is a server. And so you can so if you get cannot be found, passwords, create contacts,
I think it's under one of these sub-guides on this page. But
right. So yeah, so there is and we certainly used to be able to ask for databases to be set up, but setting up view statistics, resources, password, create a web page for employees, learn HTML, file permissions. So yeah, so there was. It has, you know, standard HTTP accesses, auth files, discussion on password protecting things. There may well be a database thing in here as well. They may have updated it since last year, but we certainly used to be able to ask for a database and PHP. Okay. So yeah, but no, it is on the so you guys have access, so we do provide you that through NTNU services.
Click on connect to yeah, there's connect to network directory.
So connect to network directory,
And then for the Windows, I think you get the list.
network directory in Windows, connect via VPN, map network drive, credentials, map network drives, blah blah blah, XP, how to do it.
there we go.
Right, so overview of NTNU file servers. So programs, there's a Samba server, home directory, which is where home directories are, and one of these will be a database system. Yes, where is it? Or have they updated it? So username, map network grown, no problems. Directory, group directories, use web edit, file stores, group names, homes, fellas. Okay, so it's not there. that would be opportune time timing. Database base self service.
Or yeah, go to search using MySQL at NTNU.
Okay,
Like that.
using MySQL NTNU.
I think that's it.
Ah, secretly buried in the Wikipedia pages. Yes, procedure: create a MySQL user. So logging into login unsat by SSH or login stood NTNU. You can then creating a database, granting it permissions, and then that will allow you to create your own full database and then graphical user interface on MyPHP admin. So you can log in to your own MyPHP admin on the database connected.
But you need to set it up first.
Yeah.
So you have to set username and password first.
Yep. So you have to do this kind of stuff here, right?
Yeah.
So, and then tips on how to use the database with PHP. So, yep. So it's all there if you want to set it up and run it, right? I don't know how long it stays alive after you leave.
I think it dies almost immediately.
Yeah. So NTNU has a weird thing that it does, which is the day after your contract ends. Oh, I know. The end of each month, it checks who's employed, and anyone not employed, it removes their email addresses. And that's the same for students. Once you're no longer a student, it just removes your email and all of the stuff. So basically, if you do set it up here and you set up your database, you export this stuff before your student ID expires. Right? And then you put it on because it's a standard SQL database and standard PHP, you just export it, you put it on a new server, and it should be up and running. Okay? So, who wants to do a custom high score system? Maybe? So, how many of you are in Unity? Right. So, what we do have for the Unity-based things is on our prod 3 server. So, under Bemuga, we have a front end and a server. Bemuga front end. So these are Unity. This is part of the Unity Asset Store, or Unity Assets, which allow you to connect Unity project. And if I look, it's under the scripts, I believe, and example script. So this has send data CS. So if we have a look at that, so this is the Unity way to a loop-backed Node.js influx database system, right? So this is another system we set up. Here you can have head. So you see you've got a dictionary that it sets up with string, header response, and where do I do it? Here. So this is the Unity code. So where I do www is a new www URL raw data, right? And so I yield on return, and so then I if this is use print, then I can process it, debug entry key. So this is an example of making a URL request. So that's the HTML request where I send a string to it, and it returns raw data in Unity. So that is the basic URL call, where I also add some debugging information to the log, and that's the print header and then print text. So those are the kind of a simple script that allows me to go provides the example script here. If I go to our example script in Unity, I can set a name is dummy with a random value, and value 1 with a random value, value 2 with a random value, age with a random value, and F is another random value, right? So I create a whole bunch of random values, and I create a dummy value with male is female false or is female true, just randomly. And then in the mono behavior I use this is influx example writer. So here is how I build up an object. So I do the dummy equals new dummy, I add a point p as a new point, and then I add tags to that and add fields to it, and then I use the influx write message get mono behavior to p, and so that is gets written this new preset measurement, right? A new point with preset measurements into the database, and there is an example query where I get the mono behavior select from dummy metrics, and I get another one there where I do a query with select 2 just to see how they work. Get again function influx db, and so this has how you'd use the influx database to do queries, right? And build objects and save objects. So we have some front end information with a Unity asset store, which it would allow me to kind of log things using the Unity URL system, and send those to a loopback API, right? That is a more modern way of doing this, right? So the simple one I did is just very hacky and simple, but if you want to actually do better and have full integration, then there are services, and we've got more services that students have developed. You can also use a number of high score serving systems, right? So you guys now have your you could use Google game services, right? So Google provides game services, and again provides analytics that way. You can also save events to various game analytics websites. Some of them will allow you to store stuff for free if you've got a small number. Some will charge you a monthly basis for how much analytics you're doing. Some will allow you to add game achievements. So you can have so there are a bunch of these which are now coming online. So so I think cloud-based game high scores. So that's the Apple developer has, if you're doing Apple stuff, it has its own API calls for if your game is on the App Store, then you just use its Apple Game Center. But you can also see, so Apple has its one from the iCloud. So that's everything you need to know about Game Center, which is the Apple one, so iMore. Save your game data. There are other services which compete. So how to make iCloud high scores in Scratch. So if you're doing that drag and droppable Scratch programming language, they have a way of integrating with iCloud. But if you also, so I think if you look at Game Analytics, is one that was doing it. Analytics. So free game analytics tool, trusted by 40,000 developers. Game analytics allow you to do store a bunch of analytics about your games and events about your games. So growth rate for use. So if you have a look at yes, it says sign up for free. So I think the try demo is features and overview, SDA integration. So if you look at how they integrate, so we love interconnectivity, but so they give you SDKs for Unity, Unreal, and most other things, right? And so you can look at what the probably if we look here, you can download the C++ integration for game analytics, and you send them data, and I think you pay per insight. But yeah, they give you a login. They give you the gameanalytics.h, which has the header file for connecting, and then you build, and you, if we show specific allowed values, so it has this game analytics. Can't see that at all, but if I make that bigger, make it bigger. Boom. No. So here, so basically you set up a vector, you push back the items, and then it does a game analytics configure available resources currencies list, and it gives you those, and so you can build up kind of lists of things, and then save those game key, secret key when you initialize, so you've got that you know it's your game, and then when you push back values, I think you push them back in pairs of where is the pushback values? They whale, dolphin, horde, alien, adding events, so right, possible nodes, so here you go, yeah, there we go, so that's a add business event, which is currency, amount, type item, cart item, so you can push events. So this is C#, this is C# code, but you can push in events and you send them to the game analytics server, and it registers them in its database. Right?
Just on a reflective note here, isn't it incredibly important to know the business models of those things first? Because if they aggregate game scores, I mean, that is a solid database to use or app use. So if they're hosting it for free and don't care about the privacy of the data is sending, they actually could have a competitive benefit advantage, in terms of investing into games or getting additional insights. So it's probably super important to.
So their business model does have, they sell reports about the game industry. Is one of the things they do, right? And so if you are logging with them all of your game events, they know the number of players you have, they know the length of time they're playing, they know all about your game and how it's being used, right? And then they can sell that, and potentially usernames, and how much time those individual users are spending on your game, by the number of achievements they're getting and stuff. So they do get a bunch of information, and they if they want to sell that to someone else, like one of your competitors, then that's possible, because there isn't necessarily unless you're paying for it, they have to find some way of making money by providing all of this wonderful stuff for you, and so you do have to be a bit aware of what the terms and conditions of game analytics are. So yeah, so do you should be a little bit worried if you're passing all your data and someone's processing it for free. How are they making their money? Right? Now on Facebook, we know they're advertising it, so the advertisers are paying for it. But sometimes companies will make you pay for something, and then they'll still sell your private data. Yeah. Yeah. So even though they're making money from advertising at you, they also have the right to sell your photos. So yeah, like knowing the business model of the company you're working with is quite important. Right? Now our business model is that the Norwegian government pays us to provide you education. Actually, no, the Norwegian government pays us to make sure you pass the exam. That's technically what our business model is. So yeah, and we have. I'm supposed to get 45 of the first years through to the bachelor's degree, but yeah. So that's how many seats I have, and we're supposed to have 50% of all students who start finish in the standard length of time. So we have some targets. Luckily in Norway, the business model isn't as crazy as in New Zealand, where you have to pass 85% of your students, and if you pass more, if you're 2% high, you get some of your funding taken away, and if you're 2% low, you get some of your funding taken away. So if you pass more than 87% of your students, you lose funding from the government because you're being too generous. And if you get under 83%, you get money taken away because you're being too hard. That's how crazy that model gets eventually. But yes, so no, understand the business model, understand where things are coming from. Okay. So what we can do is, if you guys decide you want to set up something, try and set it up yourself, because then that's a useful learning experience. If you're interested in doing some loopback stuff, that's quite easy. PMS are doing their own lobby system. I'm expecting that will be working this week, and then in the next week or so, I'm hoping they will add a high score saving at the end of the session of the lobby. So the lobby will have a high score system added to it. So you could potentially use that if you're using Unity. He's designing it to be able to have a Unity example of that. Okay, go away, have fun, code more. Look at my terrible code and laugh at me. Terrible code. Yes.
I sent you an email regarding the company I mentioned to you, the client.
Yes, and they sent me an email as well.
Oh, okay.
So we've just had an email. I had an email from them last night. Oh, I can probably stop streaming now.